Chapter 8 Space, a Vast Expanse. Summary. Escape pods are the group's only hope of getting off the ship and leaving into the vast expanse of space. Sneaking around corners when you haven't even stood up for over 2 months was admittedly very difficult, but the group didn't let it stop them. They crept as fast as they could towards where Fastel said the escape pod should be. Zuko's muscles felt tight and staticky, but he pushed on. They needed to escape. They needed to get out and help everyone else on the ship and get home. He couldn't bear the thought of never seeing his mother or All Might or his class or homeroom teacher again. Whenever he thought about the people he was taken from, it felt like his chest would rip in two. The people he cared about were a part of him. So despite how he would never wish what happened to them on anyone, a part of Izuku was glad he wasn't in this alone. The group stumbled down long, extravagant hallways, no doubt built on the backs of sentients stolen from their homes and sold without regard for where they would end up. Blue flashing lights bathed the space in a vibrant hue as the grating alarm continued to fill the air. Despite the overpowering sound, the humans still occasionally heard the noise of pounding footsteps and panicked voices, making their own heart rates spike and doubt creep into their minds. Each time, they quickly ushered their friends off to the side to duck behind pillars and let whatever commotion was going on briefly pass them. Eventually, they made it out of whatever long, extravagant hall they were in, and onto ones that were more plain and practical. Now with mazes of closed doors littering the walls, containing who knows what behind each. There was no way the humans could have made their way out without Fastel and their knowledge of the ship's layout. As they continued to pass the doors, on edge that any one of them could open and spell their doom, Bakugo stumbled over to one in a huff and let off a small explosion directly at the door's control panel. The noise of the explosion was swallowed up by the blaring alarm and general sound of chaos, but the panel let off a few sparks before seemingly dying. When Izuku saw the ruined control panel, something swelled inside of him. It wasn't much, but if breaking some things on their way out got back at the traffickers in any way, it was more than worth it. It also ensured they would have no surprise ambushes from the various mystery doors. So they continued, exploding, melting, or short-circuiting control panels on any doors they saw. Despite the small satisfaction their actions brought Izuku, he wished they could do more to get back at the traffickers. But now was not the time. Eventually, they made it to a line of circular hatch doors. Pyurpa made an excited chirp as he leaned Denki against Bakugo and rushed over to one of the hatches. He quickly opened it with a smooth twist and slipped inside. Taking his cue, the humans began stepping through it into an oval-shaped capsule. Just as Mina was securing the hatch, a fish-like alien stumbled into view right outside the clear window. Both stood frozen for a moment before the scaly humanoid began to shout to someone down the hall, the words muffled by thick walls of the craft. Mina immediately fashioned the hatch and shouted back to the group, "We need to go! Now!" slipping automatically into Japanese. The other humans quickly scrambled towards the control panel at the shout, panic once again lacing through the group. They needed to get out. Deku, at last, had the clarity of mind to ask their alien companions for help. "Must go now. How to do?" Fastel immediately traced their long fingers over the control panel, scanning each bit of alien text before quickly slamming their hand down on a blue button. All of a sudden, the pod jerked forward, shooting away from the ship, until it was soon no more than a speck in the distance. Finally, the group had a moment to breathe. They had done it! They were off that hell ship at last. Izuku silently mourned all those they had left behind, but rationally, he knew there was nothing they could have done in their states. So instead, He focused on crackling all the bones in his body. Pops and cracks could be heard coming from all the humans as they finally were able to work out the kinks that had been building up in their systems, chasing away feelings of stiffness and static-filled limbs. Relief immediately washed over their tight, sore bodies at the sensation. Settling back upright after a particularly good back crack, Izuku now saw the horrified faces of Pyropa and Fastel. "What is wrong?" Izuku questioned. "What is wrong?" Fastel stated. "Are you all okay? How are you making those sounds? Did something happen to your bones?" The mortified expression was clear in their voices as they addressed the group. "It is normal, is it not for you?" Izuku replied. The look on the two Orseers' faces made it clear that this was not, in fact, normal for other sentients. "It is only air buildup." "Air?" Fastel cautiously questioned. "Do not know word," Izuku admitted. The word nitrogen had surprisingly not come up in casual conversation. "Weird. Not important, though," he concluded. Continuing to get odd looks from their alien companions, the teens went back to stretching and contorting themselves until all their joints were quiet. Now that that had been taken care of, everyone but Izuku began to use their quirks, reveling in finally having them back after so long. Loose objects floated around the shuttle along with Ochako herself. Small pops could be heard occasionally coming from Katsuki, though he was careful not to make too many and possibly deplete their oxygen supply. Dinky was staring at the electricity flowing between his hands, softly glowing in the dim lighting of the pod. A small puddle of acid just sat in Mina's hands. Mei was right up against the shuttle window, looking at passing planets, zooming in as far as her quirk could take her. Deku, on the other hand, just let out a weary sigh and slumped his exhausted body onto the floor. As soon as they had settled into the escape pod, Izuku had tried to call upon One for All. All that had happened was an almost silent whisper in the back of his brain. "Not now, Night." Before it felt like he was being physically pushed away from his power. Izuku could only assume that it was one of the vestiges speaking up, locking away the quirk for now. He hadn't had much time to try to communicate with the vestiges because of the whole abducted by aliens thing, but he knew they had some way to view his life. They must have seen how weak his body was now and stopped him from even trying to use One for All. While it was probably a good idea, it still hurt to be without the familiar buzz of power under his skin. It hurt that they took it away from him again. Like it was his fault he couldn't use it. Like he was being punished for being so useless and weak. Izuku knew they didn't mean it like that, but he couldn't help the thoughts swirling around in his head. Fastel and Pyropa soon joined the lone Izuku on the floor with questioning looks. "Why aren't you using your power?" Pyropa innocently asked. The simple question had Izuku's gnawing disappointment biting down harder on his heart. He knew this was a possibility. He should have been more prepared. "My power need muscle to work. I am weak right now. Power not work yet." He tried his best to explain. There was not really a word for quirk in basic, and funny biology/medical terms were another thing that had surprisingly not come up. There was also the fact that his quirk was not normal in any sense, that it was currently being held back by 7.5 ghosts in his head so he didn't blow off his limbs. Maybe now that they were off that trafficking ship, he could finally learn the language properly. That was one thing to look forward to. Who knows how long it could take to get back to Earth? The thought made Izuku frown. When would they be able to see Earth again? Their families and class must be worried sick, but there's not much they can do about it now. It would take however long it took to travel back to Earth. Most likely noticing a lack of green lightning, the other UA students gathered around Izuku. A questioning stare was more than enough prompting, so Izuku did his best to sum up the situation. They all seemed surprised to hear that Izuku's quirk needed an insane amount of muscle mass to even function. Excluding Kachan. I think it's some sort of safety measure, Izuku lied. When I first unlocked my quirk, it almost felt like one wrong move and the energy would rip me limb from limb. So once I hit the necessary threshold, I should be able to use it again. It might just take a while. He tried his best to show a reassuring grin, but even he could tell it was weary. He didn't like lying to his friends, but he wasn't quite ready to explain the mess that was his quirk. He probably would, someday. Not yet, though. Sensing the drop in mood, Izuku quickly moved to cheer everyone up. But that's not important right now. We escaped. We're free. Now we can start heading back to Earth as soon as we get some sort of ship. I feel really bad for leaving all those aliens behind on the ship, though, Uraraka said forlornly. Then we should do something, Mina piped in. Before we get back to Earth, we can do something to take down both groups who imprisoned us. We are heroes in training, after all, smiled Denki. Notes. So yeah, Deku doesn't have his quirk back yet. Ghosts are totally gatekeeping him. No gaslighting, but perhaps girl bossing right now. I feel like it makes the most sense logic-wise and plot-wise. Later there's going to be some focus on Izu's quirk, but I wanted to cover some stuff with other characters first. It will be back, though. Notes. So yeah, Deku doesn't have his quirk back yet. Ghosts are totally gatekeeping him. No gaslighting, but perhaps girl bossing right now. I feel like it makes the most sense logic-wise and plot-wise. Later there's going to be some focus on Izu's quirk, but I wanted to cover some stuff with other characters first. It will be back, though.